You never really expect death to take the young, it's unnatural. A cruel inversion of how life is supposed to unfold. Parents burying children, no one prepares you for that, and if they did, it wouldn't help. The silence after such a loss doesn't feel like silence at all, it roars. It screams in every corner of the house, every object left untouched, every photograph where the smile now haunts more than comforts. And that was the world Hannah Mitchell had lived in for 5 long, unbearable years. She wasn't always like this. Before it happened, Hannah was the woman people went to for warmth, advice, a quick laugh. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was full. Her job at the city office, her modest home in a quiet neighborhood of New Jersey, her husband Mark, and most of all, her son, Andrew. Andrew was everything. 16 years old, handsome, athletic, funny, polite, the kind of boy other mothers secretly wished was their own. He was her pride, her joy, and her future. Then, one morning, he was gone. No accident can ever be softened by the word accident. A hiking trip with classmates, part of his adventure club. He'd gone on dozens before. This time was supposed to be routine, just 2 weeks out in the woods. The first week went by fine. The second started with Hannah waking in the middle of the night, panic crashing down on her chest like a tidal wave. A mother's intuition is a cruel gift. By noon the next day, her world was destroyed. Andrew had drowned alone, at dawn. No one saw it, no one heard him call for help. No foul play, no negligence, just a good boy walking into water and never walking out. Hannah doesn't remember much of the days that followed. The funeral, the screaming, the medication. Her husband packing his bags and leaving 3 weeks later with words that cut worse than silence. I can't do this anymore, and maybe he couldn't. But she didn't have the luxury to stop breathing, even when every breath felt like betrayal. For 5 years, Hannah lived, if you could even call it that. She woke up, went to work, came home, sat in the dark. She ate only when her body demanded it. She answered co-workers with nods or single-syllable replies. Her apartment became a tomb. Not for Andrew, his ashes were elsewhere, but for her own life, her own joy, her own sense of self. Only one room remained untouched, Andrew's bedroom. She vacuumed it once a week, dusted carefully, but never moved a thing. His shoes still lined up by the wall, books still stacked on his desk. Posters, notebooks, trophies all frozen in time. She would sit on the edge of his bed and talk to him as if he were still there. Not in some psychotic break, but in quiet desperation. He didn't speak back, but she believed he heard. Not at the cemetery, that place felt too cold, too final. But in this room, he was alive. Sometimes she would hear a creak in the floorboards, feel a shift in the air, and convince herself it was him just passing through, just letting her know he hadn't left completely. On one occasion, a bird landed on the windowsill as she whispered to the air, "Should I put on a little makeup tomorrow?" It didn't answer, but it hopped once and flew away. That was enough. People around her had tried. In the beginning, friends brought casseroles and sympathy. Co-workers whispered condolences, but grief makes others uncomfortable. Prolonged grief, that makes them leave. After a while, no one knew what to say to a woman who had lost her entire reason to wake up in the morning. So they stopped saying anything. Hannah didn't blame them. She barely remembered what it was like to hold a conversation that didn't orbit around death. Then came the day everything stopped again. The layoffs weren't personal, the company was struggling. The dispatch office where Hannah had spent the last few years alone, silent, safely tucked away, was being shut down. She was among the first to be let go. No drama. No thank you for your service speech. Just a small envelope with a final paycheck and a silent exit through a back door she had grown used to. That night, she sat in Andrew's room. For the first time, she opened his drawers, touched his belongings. She had never dared to do that before. But now, with nothing left, no job, no purpose, she thought maybe it was time. She picked up a stack of books and opened one. A card fell out. "I love you, Mum." It was his handwriting, his voice, in ink. Hannah sank to the floor, clutching the card to her chest as if it could restart her broken heart. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to sob loud, choking, unfiltered grief that racked her entire body. That night, she whispered to Andrew through gasps of breath, "Why did you leave me? Why didn't you take me with you? But no answer came. Later, as she lay in bed, she had the first dream of him in half a decade. His face was blurred, but his voice was unmistakable. You're not alone, Mom. You've just stopped living. But I'm still with you. I always will be. Then he said something that changed everything. Live for me. That dream stayed with her the next morning. It wasn't just a dream, it was a challenge, a request, a chance. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something new. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and feel something you hadn't felt in a while, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt, meaningful stories to life and maybe, just maybe, helps someone else find their light again. Now, let me leave you with a question to reflect on. If someone you love deeply passed away, what would be harder for you to live with? Of forgetting their voice over time, be holding on so tightly to their memory that you stop living yourself. Type will be in the comments. I read every single one. It was a grey, drizzling morning in late October, the kind that wraps around your bones and won't let go. The kind of morning when grief doesn't just revisit, it settles in, like an old friend you never wanted. Hannah Mitchell wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck and made her way down the narrow path between headstones at Forest Hill Cemetery. The sky was a curtain of pale grey, the air wet and bitter. She hadn't planned to come today, but the silence in her apartment had been deafening. With the recent loss of her job, the only routine she had left was fading, and the weight of purposelessness was beginning to smother her. She reached Andrew's grave, knelt beside it, and rested her hand on the damp metal fence. I miss you, she whispered, though she knew he wouldn't answer. He never did not hear. In his bedroom, it still felt like he was there, like the air remembered him. But this place, this patch of grass and granite only reminded her that he was truly gone. She closed her eyes, letting the cold soak into her fingertips, grounding herself in the discomfort. Maybe that's all that was left for her now, memories, discomfort, and time to kill. Then something shifted. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a figure crouched low behind a nearby gravestone. At first, she thought it was a forgotten bag of leaves or an old tarp, but then it moved. She squinted through the drizzle, a child. A small boy, barely more than a bundle of wet clothing and bony limbs, huddled against the iron fence. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He was soaked to the bone, and something about the stillness of his form sent a sharp, almost maternal panic rushing through her. She stood slowly and took a cautious step toward him. Hey there, she called gently, uncertain. What are you doing out here, sweetheart? Are you lost? The boy turned his head, eyes hollow and red-rimmed. His voice came out cracked and hoarse, barely audible. Nothing. Hannah's heart dropped. His words were empty, but his eyes were screaming. She took another step. You can't sit here like this. You'll catch cold. Are you here alone? He nodded, then muttered, my mom and dad ... they're buried here. It was like being punched in the chest. For a moment, Hannah couldn't breathe. This boy, no older than 7, was sitting alone in the rain at the gravesite of his parents. Her pain was real, yes, but his was raw, fresh, unimaginable. I'm Hannah, she said softly, kneeling down beside him. I'm here visiting my son. He died 5 years ago. He didn't answer. Just stared past her, his gaze fixed somewhere between memory and nowhere. What's your name? She asked gently. Jacob, he whispered. Jacob, she repeated, grounding herself in the sound of it. That's a strong name. Where are you supposed to be right now, Jacob? I ran away, he said, brushing his wet sleeve across his cheek. From the orphanage. Hannah's breath caught again. She looked him over, skinny, shaking, soaked. Why would you do that? His lower lip trembled. It's awful there. The older boys are mean. They steal. They make us lie and do bad stuff. I don't want to be like them. I'd rather just stay here, with my parents. The words came out with a flatness that didn't belong in a child's voice, not at his age, not ever. You're too young to talk like that, she said, her throat tightening. Too young to give up. He shrugged. Nobody cares. I'm just one of the leftovers. No family, no one's coming. Hannah had heard many heartbreaking things in her life, but this was something else. She couldn't unhear those words. It was as if the boy had unknowingly mirrored the echo inside her. She wrapped her coat around him and helped him to his feet. He resisted, just a little, but didn't fight. "There's a cafe just a block away," she said gently. "Let's get warm, get something hot to drink." "You can't stay here like this," he hesitated, then nodded. At the cafe, they sat near a window where the fog clung to the glass like sorrow that refused to clear. Hannah ordered tea and warm pastries. Jacob cupped the mug with both hands, but didn't sip right away. He looked tired, weary, wounded. "You said no one cares," Hannah said quietly. "But I care." He glanced up, eyes still suspicious, but a crack of curiosity had begun to show. "You shouldn't," he muttered. "They won't let you take me. Nobody wants kids like me. Only babies get adopted. That's what the staff says." Hannah exhaled slowly. "Well, maybe they're wrong. Maybe someone is out there who's not looking for a baby. Maybe someone's just looking for you." He stared at her then, uncertain. "You mean you?" "I mean ... I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I live alone now. I've been alone for a long time. But I saw you today, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone might need me again." Jacob blinked, his lip trembling again, but this time it wasn't anger or despair, it was hope. Faint, fragile, like a candle in a windstorm. But it was there. "I don't want to go back," he whispered. "I know," she said, reaching for his hand. "But I can't take you home, not yet. That would be wrong. And I don't want to do anything that might get you or me in trouble. But I can take you back and talk to them, make sure they know what's happening. And maybe ... if you want ... I could visit often." His fingers wrapped around hers, tiny and cold. "You promise?" "I promise," she said. "And who knows ... maybe this is just the beginning." In that moment, Hannah wasn't sure what the future held. She didn't know what legal obstacles lay ahead or whether her heart could withstand another loss. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. That morning, in a quiet cemetery under a cold October rain, something shifted inside her. Maybe grief had found its match, maybe, for the first time in years, life was knocking again. And maybe this time, she would open the door. When Hannah Mitchell walked Jacob back to the orphanage that day, something inside her had shifted. She had stepped into the cemetery as a woman who had been walking through life like a ghost, quiet, cold, unnoticed. But something about that small, trembling boy had reignited a warmth inside her that she hadn't felt in years. He didn't just need protection, he needed someone to believe in him. And maybe, just maybe, she needed that too. The days that followed were filled with a kind of energy Hannah hadn't known in years. It wasn't joy, she wasn't ready for that. But it was movement, purpose, direction. After dropping Jacob off, she had spoken to the orphanage staff, careful not to overwhelm them with emotion. She had explained how she found him, how he'd opened up to her, how she wanted to help. There was skepticism at first, the polite but guarded kind. For all, the world had seen people like Hannah before, well-meaning, touched by a moment of emotion, but likely to drift away after reality set back in. But Hannah wasn't drifting, she was anchoring. She went home that night and sat in what had always been Andrew's room. She looked around not with pain, but with intention. For 5 years, the room had been a sacred place of mourning. She hadn't moved a thing. His posters, his books, the soccer trophy he'd won at 13, they all remained, untouched, like relics of a life paused mid-sentence. But that evening, she allowed her hand to rest on the surface of his desk and whispered aloud, "Would you mind if someone else needed this space?" The room didn't answer, of course it didn't, but it also didn't resist. The next morning, she made a list. If she wanted to adopt Jacob, she would need a stable job, a livable income, and an inspected home. She had the apartment, she had the will. But she needed work, and fast. She started with calls, a few leads, dead ends. She considered dipping into her savings, but quickly realized there wasn't much left to stretch. It had been enough to survive barely, and not enough to meet adoption requirements. Still, she pressed forward, determined. Failure was not an option, not now. Then, out of nowhere, a call came. It was Harland, her former supervisor from the city office, someone she hadn't spoken to since the layoffs. He sounded surprised to hear her voice, and she didn't hide the truth, she needed work. "Something steady, something soon. Funny you say that," he said. I've just joined a new firm, helping a friend launch a department. We're looking for reliable people, and frankly, I'd trust you with anything. You interested?" The relief that washed over her was so sudden, so overwhelming, that she had to sit down. She didn't even ask about the salary or title. She just said yes. It was a job. It was hope. It was exactly what she needed. With paperwork in hand, Hannah returned to the orphanage a week later, not just as a visitor, but as someone ready to build something permanent. She met with the director, submitted her documents, and explained her desire to adopt Jacob. The woman listened carefully, her demeanor shifting from cautious professionalism to something warmer. "You understand this won't be quick," the director said. "There's a process, evaluations, home inspections. And Jacob... well, he's been through a lot. This won't be simple." "I don't need simple," Hannah replied, her voice steady. "I need real." They granted her visitation rights immediately. Weekends, supervised at first, then short outings. Trips to the library, walks in the park. Jacob's walls, though thick, were not unbreakable. Slowly, he began to talk more, smile more, laugh just a little. He asked questions about Hannah's past, about Andrew. She answered honestly, careful not to compare the two boys. Jacob wasn't a replacement, he was a beginning. On their fourth visit, Hannah brought him to her home. "This is your room," she said, opening the door to what had once been a shrine. The posters were gone now, the walls freshly painted a pale blue. The bed had new sheets, the bookshelf was half empty, waiting to be filled. Jacob's eyes went wide. "This is for me." "If you want it," she said softly. He stepped inside slowly, like a visitor entering a museum. His fingers ran along the edge of the desk. "Did your son use this?" "Yes," she said. "But he'd want someone like you to have it now." Jacob didn't say anything, but the way he gently placed his small backpack on the floor said enough. That night, Hannah stood in the hallway watching him brush his teeth, something so normal it felt almost surreal. She thought about how far they'd both come from different kinds of loss, different kinds of silence, and how, somehow, they'd found each other. He peeked out of the bathroom, toothbrush in mouth. "Hey... if you adopt me, do I have to call you Mom?" The question caught her off guard. She smiled, gently. "You don't have to call me anything you're not ready for. You had a mom. I'm not here to replace her." Jacob looked down, thoughtful. "Okay... but maybe one day." "Maybe one day," she echoed. As the weeks passed, Hannah found herself rearranging her life not out of duty but desire. She applied to parenting workshops, reconnected with an old friend who was a school counselor, and started keeping a journal again, something she hadn't done since Andrew died. She felt alive, not whole, not healed, but undeniably alive. Then came the call she had been waiting for. "All background checks are clear. Home inspection passed." "You've done everything right," the director said. "You're eligible to proceed with formal adoption." Hannah hung up the phone and sat very still. She didn't cry, not immediately. She just stared out the window as the autumn leaves drifted past, feeling the weight of something powerful settle over her. Not fear, not grief, but responsibility. A second chance, not just for Jacob, but for herself. That evening, Jacob gave her a drawing he had made at the orphanage. It was simple: a house, a tree, a woman with curly hair standing beside a boy. In shaky handwriting, it said, "Our home." She placed it on the fridge next to the photo of Andrew that had hung alone for years. They weren't a perfect family, but they were becoming one. And sometimes, that's more than enough. It had been nearly 3 months since Hannah Mitchell began the adoption process for Jacob, and for the first time in years, her life had rhythm again. Every day had purpose. She went to work with quiet determination, picked up groceries with the thought of feeding two rather than one, and returned home to make a little more space in her heart and in her apartment. Jacob wasn't officially her son yet, but in every way that mattered, he already was. He came on weekends now, sometimes longer. They had routines: hot chocolate before bed, storytelling that veered into silly, and long walks where he asked questions about life, loss, and everything in between. Each visit deepened their bond. Jacob had begun to let his guard down, and Hannah, for the first time since Andrew's death, had let herself feel love again, unafraid, unguarded. Then came the phone call. It was the director of the orphanage. Her tone was firm but regretful, and the words fell like cold stones into Hannah's chest. Jacob's biological uncle has come forward. His name is Sterling Brooks. He has submitted legal paperwork to claim guardianship. The world didn't spin, it stopped. Hannah sat in silence for a long moment, fingers clenched around the phone. I don't understand, she managed. The director hesitated. He's been living out of state. Apparently, he didn't know about the accident until months after it happened. Once he did, he began the process of getting his life in order to bring Jacob in. It took longer than expected, but now that he's stepped forward, the law gives him priority. Even if Jacob doesn't know him, Hannah asked, her voice brittle. Even if he doesn't want to go, Jacob is under 10. His preferences carry emotional weight, yes, but not legal weight, I'm sorry. It was a strange thing, to feel a heartbreak again after it had already been shattered once before. Hannah hadn't known it could happen. But it did. That evening, the apartment that had started to feel like home again shrunk around her. She went into Jacob's room, the one she had carefully restored and made his, and sat on the bed, clutching the little drawing he had made our home. She stared at it for hours. The next morning, unable to sit still, she wandered outside in the cold. Snow had begun to fall gentle at first, then heavier, clinging to her coat, her hair, her eyelashes. She found herself on a bench, frozen not just by the weather but by helplessness. It wasn't fair. Why now? Why? Just when life had found her again, did it threaten to leave? She was still sitting there when a stranger approached. "Miss, are you all right?" His voice was soft, warm, the kind used by someone who knew grief by name. Hannah didn't look at him right away. "I'm not a miss, and no, I'm not all right. But there's nothing you can do." The man didn't leave. Instead, he handed her a small pack of tissues, which she accepted without thanks. "I don't mean to pry," he said gently, "but sometimes talking helps. And you seem like someone who needs to speak." Hannah surprised herself by laughing bitterly. "Are you a therapist?" "No, just someone who's been there." That was enough. The words came in pieces at first, then poured out like a flood. She told him everything about her son, her loneliness, Jacob, the tentative joy of rebuilding her life, and the sudden threat of losing it all again. When she finished, she looked up at him properly for the first time. He was in his mid-40s, dressed modestly but neatly, his face kind but weary, like a man who had lived through more than he let on, and then he said it. "I'm Sterling Brooks," he said quietly. "Jacob's uncle." The world didn't stop this time. It cracked. Hannah could barely breathe. "You what?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't know who you were at first. I was walking through the neighborhood, trying to clear my head after speaking with the orphanage. I didn't expect to run into anyone, let alone ... you." She stared at him, stunned. "Then why are you here now?" "Why now, after everything?" Sterling sighed, and something in his eyes shifted. "Regret, maybe, or shame. I wish I could say I had a good reason. The truth is, life fell apart for me too. I was going through a messy divorce when Jacob's parents died. I didn't even hear about the accident until months later. By then, I had no job, no home, and no ability to take in a child. I didn't think I was the right person." "And now you do?" she asked, her voice sharp, brittle. "I've got a stable job now, a house. I've gotten my footing back," he said. "But more than that, I want to do what's right. His family, my brother's son, I don't want to erase what you've done. I can see you care for him deeply, but I can't ignore my responsibility either." Hannah folded her arms tightly. Responsibility. That boy doesn't need a legal guardian. He needs a mother, he needs consistency, he needs love. Not someone who just now decided to show up. Sterling nodded, taking the words without defense. "You're right," he said. "And I'm not here to take him from you, not in the way you think. I don't know what the right answer is. That's why I haven't made any moves yet. That's why I'm here." They sat in silence for a long time, snow gathering around their feet like the weight of unsaid things. Then Sterling spoke again. "What if we didn't think about this as either or?" Hannah turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we found a way to make this work together? I could move closer. We could talk about shared custody, or visitation, or something in between. I don't want to hurt him, or you. But I also want to be a part of his life. For the first time since the phone call, Hannah didn't feel like she was drowning. The idea sounded impossible, messy, complicated, but it was a start. I'm not making promises, she said quietly. Neither am I, Sterling replied, but maybe we can figure it out together. Later that week, they both visited the orphanage and asked to speak to Jacob. He ran to them, eyes wide with joy at the sight of them together. But when he saw their serious expressions, he frowned. You're not fighting, are you? He asked, his voice small. No, Hannah said, pulling him close. We're trying to figure things out, because we both love you. Jacob looked between them, eyes glistening. Can't we all just live together? They didn't answer right away. But that question, naive, beautiful, impossibly simple, lingered. Maybe, just maybe, it was the right one. Jacob's question lingered in the space between them, delicate and enormous all at once. Can't we all just live together? Hannah Mitchell hadn't prepared herself for that kind of simplicity. Children could ask the most impossible things as if they were asking for toast. But as she looked at his face, hopeful, fragile, full of longing, she couldn't bring herself to say no. Sterling Brooks, too, was caught off guard. He had come into the conversation ready for tension, ready to assert legal rights, but instead found himself disarmed by the same boy who was supposed to be the center of a battle. Instead of choosing sides, Jacob had opened a door neither adult had considered. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between Sterling and Hannah. Not agreement, not yet, but the first breath of possibility. That afternoon, they walked with Jacob through the snowy park, watching him dart ahead to kick piles of slush and scoop snow into clumsy handfuls. He laughed more freely than either of them had ever heard. The boy who had once whispered about death at a cemetery was now running with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. It struck them both how delicate this joy was, how hard-won and how worth protecting. After dropping Jacob back at the orphanage, Hannah and Sterling stood outside in the parking lot. The sun had dropped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the snow. Hannah rubbed her gloved hands together, not just from the cold, but to ground herself. She was still wary. Trust wasn't something she gave easily, not anymore. But she had also seen something in Sterling that day. Restraint. He could have taken Jacob away by law. He hadn't. He was listening. I'm not ready to merge our lives, she said slowly, but I don't want to lose him. I can't lose him. I don't want to take him from you, Sterling replied. But I don't want to disappear, either. Maybe we start small, visits, shared weekends, and we see where it goes. It was a messy arrangement, unofficial at first, informal. There were long conversations, sometimes late into the night, where they tried to map out what together might actually mean. There were arguments, too small flare-ups about schedules, school registration, bedtime routines. Hannah was more protective, Sterling more relaxed. But beneath it all was one shared desire, Jacob's happiness. Over the next year, what began as an awkward truce evolved into something resembling family. Sterling found a job in the same city and moved into an apartment a few blocks from Hannah's. They coordinated school drop-offs, weekend plans, and slowly began to step into a rhythm. Jacob thrived, his grades improved, he made friends. He began sleeping through the night again. The adoption process moved forward as planned. Because Sterling had not formally adopted Jacob and had willingly deferred guardianship, the court granted Hannah full parental rights. It was a quiet ceremony, attended by a few staff members from the orphanage and a caseworker. No balloons, no celebration. Just a signature on a paper and a sudden, overwhelming moment when Jacob turned to her and said, "You're really my mom now." "I always was," she whispered, brushing his hair back, "but now the world knows it too." After that day, Jacob began to call her mom more often, at first in private, then gradually in front of others. The first time he did it in front of Sterling, they were at the kitchen table. Sterling didn't flinch or look wounded, he only smiled and nodded, understanding what it meant. And yet, Hannah never forgot how delicate it all still was. She remembered what it was like to lose everything. To build trust only to see it threatened, so she took nothing for granted. Not the quiet mornings when Jacob pattered down the hallway in socks too big for his feet. Not the evenings when Sterling stopped by to help with homework or brought over soup when Jacob caught the flu. Every act of normalcy felt like a gift she had once thought she'd never open again. It took nearly 2 years before the idea of truly living together surfaced again, this time from Hannah. They had grown used to the shuffle between homes, the calendar coordination, the text messages to clarify who was picking Jacob up from school. But it was exhausting, and it wasn't sustainable forever. More than that, they had become something none of them expected, a team. "I'm not proposing marriage," Hannah said one evening over dinner. "I'm proposing stability," Sterling chuckled, then looked down at his plate. And here I was thinking about buying a ring. The silence that followed wasn't tense, it was thoughtful, tentative. Then she laughed, and he did too, and the conversation carried on into plans for a new home. They found a spacious apartment with enough bedrooms for everyone to breathe. Jacob got his own room again, and Hannah, for the first time in years, decorated without hesitation. She let go of the idea that Andrew's memory would be erased by new memories. She realized they could coexist, that Andrew wasn't being replaced, but extended, in the love she now gave to someone new. Eventually, Hannah and Sterling did marry, not with fanfare, but with quiet commitment. A simple ceremony at City Hall, a dinner afterward with just Jacob and two close friends. There were no speeches, no rings exchanged in front of an audience. But there was a vow, unspoken but understood, that they had all chosen each other, not by blood, but by something deeper. On her 45th birthday, Hannah received a card from Jacob. It was hand-drawn, messy, and perfect. On the front, it read, "Mom, I love you." Inside was a picture of the three of them standing in front of their new apartment, drawn in crayon, with stick figure smiles and a sun in the corner. She placed the card on a shelf in the hallway, right next to the old one she had found in Andrew's room all those years ago. The two sat side by side, one from the son she lost, and one from the son she found. And in her heart, she whispered, "We're doing okay, sweetheart, I think you'd be proud." She didn't know what the future would bring. Life had taught her better than to expect stability to last forever. But she had learned something even more important. When life offers you a second chance at love, no matter how late or how broken you feel, you take it. You take it with trembling hands and guarded heart. But you take it, and you fight for it every day. Life rarely gives us perfect stories. More often than not, we are handed broken pieces, a shattered family, a lost child, a dream that ended too soon. But sometimes, in the middle of the wreckage, something beautiful begins to take root. Not in grand gestures or miracle endings, but in the quiet, determined acts of love that build something stronger than what was lost. This story was never about fixing the past, it was about learning to carry it forward with grace, while choosing to love again, even when the heart is still healing. Hannah didn't set out to be anyone's savior. She was just a grieving mother who had stopped expecting life to offer her anything more. And yet, through a chance encounter with a lonely boy in a cemetery, the door to life opened again. Jacob didn't need her to be perfect. He needed her to show up, to care, to try. And she did, one imperfect step at a time. Sterling, too, was not the hero the world waits for. He came with his own regrets, his own past mistakes, but he chose to step forward when it mattered. He didn't force his way into Jacob's life. He earned it slowly, respectfully, not by erasing the bond between Hannah and Jacob, but by adding to it, honoring it. Together, they didn't rewrite their stories, they wrote a new chapter. And in that choice, they formed something that wasn't conventional, but was deeply, unmistakably family. What this story reminds us is that family is not just who we're born to, it's who we choose to fight for. Love doesn't erase grief, but it softens the sharp edges. It doesn't promise ease, but it does offer meaning. And when we decide to lean into love, even when it's complicated, even when it's inconvenient, we give ourselves the best chance at healing, at connection, at hope. This isn't just a story about Hannah, or Jacob, or Sterling. It's a story about all of us, about second chances, about the quiet people who choose to care, about the belief that even after everything is lost, something good can still be found, something worthy, something lasting. So if you're watching this and you've been carrying pain, maybe from loss, from broken family ties, from your own mistakes, know this: it's never too late to try again. To love again, to open your heart, however bruised it may be. You don't need to have all the answers, you just need to be willing. The lesson here is simple, but powerful. Life is not about having everything figured out, it's about showing up for the people who matter, especially when it's hard. It's about creating home not in a place, but in each other. In kindness, in consistency, in forgiveness. And here's how you can apply that in your own life. Reach out to someone you've grown distant from. You don't need a perfect speech. Just a "Hey, I've been thinking about you" might be enough. If you've experienced loss, don't wait to feel ready to open your heart again. Readiness isn't a feeling, it's a decision. If you're raising a child, yours or not, know that what they need more than perfection is your presence. And most importantly, don't let the fear of the past rob you of a future that might just surprise you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Do you believe family is more about blood or more about love and presence? Comment below with your answer, and feel free to share your thoughts so others can learn from your view too. And if this story moved you, even just a little, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. If you'd like to go a step further, a small donation, no matter the amount, would go a long way in helping an old storyteller like me keep creating meaningful content for people like you. I may be aging, but I still believe in the power of good stories to change hearts. So if you feel inspired, encouraged, or simply seen help me keep going, thank you.